The winter of 1779 settled over the Atlantic world like a growing shadow. But in the halls of European courts and the muddy fields of America, a sense of shift, a dangerous shift, had begun. The American Revolution, once a regional conflict between Britain and its 13 colonies, was no longer just America's war. It had become something larger, deeper, and more unpredictable. It had become a global struggle, and the stakes for Britain, for America, for Europe had never been higher. News traveled slowly across oceans in those days, yet when it arrived, it struck like thunder. Word had reached London that Spain, under the Bourbon Family Compact, had quietly prepared to enter the war, not openly in alliance with the American rebels, but certainly against Britain. Spain had not forgotten the territories it lost in past wars, and it saw Britain weakened, stretched thin, vulnerable. Now, they would reclaim what had once been theirs. And with that decision, the largest empire in the world suddenly found itself surrounded. Britain, confident at the start of the rebellion, now faced France, Spain, and the American colonies. A storm from all sides. The war at sea intensified first. The Atlantic, once a highway for British supplies and reinforcements, became a hunting ground. Spanish and French fleets began to block British ships, cornering them on routes they had once dominated. Merchant ships disappeared into the horizon, never to be seen again. British admirals wrote frantic letters to London, warning that the Royal Navy, pride of the empire, could no longer be everywhere at once. Meanwhile, in America, General George Washington watched the global shift with cautious hope. France had already joined the cause 2 years earlier, bringing soldiers, weapons, and the navy. Now Spain entered the fight. The pressure on Britain increased. But Washington understood something most people did not. Foreign alliances did not guarantee American victory. Britain, even weakened, was still powerful and clever. If they could not crush the rebellion in the north, they would find another front to exploit. And so they turned their eyes to the American South. By early 1780, a new British strategy emerged, one born of desperation but also of calculation. The South, unlike New England, had a large loyalist population. Thousands of colonists there still considered themselves British subjects. Britain believed if it could take the South, capture its ports, rally its loyalists, cut off supply lines, it could suffocate the rebellion from below. Then the North would fall like a house of cards. The plan was ambitious. It was risky. But if it worked, Britain could still win the war. Charleston, South Carolina, one of the most important ports in the colonies, became the first target. At daybreak in early 1780, the residents of Charleston awoke to a sight that stole the breath from their lungs. The horizon filled with sails. Dozens, then hundreds. A massive British fleet under General Sir Henry Clinton and Admiral Marriott Arbuthnot encircled the city by sea, while British troops marched by land, closing the trap. Inside Charleston, the defenders braced themselves. General Benjamin Lincoln commanded a mixed force of Continentals and militia. They were brave, but outnumbered. Supplies dwindled. Every night, the British cannons inched closer, their bombardments echoing like rolling thunder across the harbor. Charleston held out for weeks, ran out of food, ran out of gunpowder, ran out of hope. Finally, after a siege that pushed the defenders beyond human endurance, the city surrendered. It was the largest American defeat of the war. Over 5,000 American soldiers were captured. A major city gone. The shock rippled across the colonies like an earthquake. But what Britain did not know, what they refused to believe, was that the South did not behave like the North. This land had swamps instead of mountains, scattered plantations instead of tight towns, and people who did not always fight in lines or wait for battles made by generals. In the deep swamps of South Carolina, a new kind of war began, a war of shadows. American militia fighters, led by men like Francis Marion, refused to surrender. Marion, later called the Swamp Fox, did not fight like a European officer. He struck at night, vanished at dawn, moved silently through watery forests that British cavalry dared not enter. His men burned British wagons, freed prisoners, and disappeared before the British could regroup. To the Loyalists, he was a ghost. To the Patriots, he was hope. Every British victory in the South seemed to unravel just as quickly, undone by hit-and-run raids, ambushes, and broken supply lines. Britain had won Charleston, but it could not tame the land. Still, Britain pressed forward. After Charleston, they captured Camden, another important city, and stationed General Charles Cornwallis to lead the Southern Campaign. Cornwallis was confident. He had numbers, experience, supplies. He believed he could crush the rebellion in the South in months, not years. So he marched northward through the Carolinas, determined to break the last traces of resistance. But the Americans were not done. General Horatio Gates, hero of Saratoga, was sent to stop Cornwallis. Gates marched his army toward Camden with speed, too much speed. His troops were exhausted, hungry, unprepared. The night before the battle, they had almost no food. Some had never even fought in a major battle. Before dawn on August 16, 1780, the two armies clashed at Camden. It was a disaster for the Americans. Gates' militia panicked when the British regulars advanced with bayonets. Within minutes, they fled the field. The Continental soldiers held firm as long as they could, but they were overwhelmed. The defeat was total. Camden became one of the darkest moments of the war. In Philadelphia, Congress was stunned. In camp, Washington remained silent. But he knew something had become clear. The South would not be saved by generals who chased glory or armies that marched without discipline. The South needed patience, strategy, and a commander who understood both. That man was Nathanael Greene. Greene arrived in the South in late 1780. Calm, thoughtful, and brilliant under pressure. He studied the land, the people, the strengths and weaknesses of both sides. He realized he could not win by confronting Cornwallis head-on, not with the small, battered army he inherited. So Greene chose another path, a path of retreat and attack, retreat and attack. He divided his army, forcing Cornwallis to chase multiple threats at once. Each chase exhausted the British, pulled them deeper into hostile territory, and stretched their supply lines thin. And then, in January 1781, Greene's bold strategy delivered one of the most surprising victories of the war, the Battle of Cowpens. General Daniel Morgan, one of Greene's trusted commanders, faced British Colonel Banastre Tarleton, a fierce, ambitious officer known for his brutality. Tarleton believed he could crush Morgan quickly, just as he had crushed other militia units. But Morgan set a trap. He arranged his men in 3 lines. Militia in front, Continentals behind them, cavalry hidden on the flanks. He knew the militia could not stand long, but he also knew they did not need to. They only needed to fire 2 volleys, then fall back in an orderly retreat. Tarleton took the bait. When the militia retreated, he believed the Americans were collapsing, just like at Camden. He ordered a full charge. But he charged straight into the 2nd and 3rd lines of the American army. Suddenly surrounded, the British force broke. In just 1 hour, Tarleton's unit was destroyed. Over 800 British soldiers were captured. Cowpens electrified the rebellion. It showed the world that American strategy had matured, that the Southern Campaign was not Britain's path to victory. It was becoming a quicksand pulling them deeper. Cornwallis, furious and desperate, chased Greene across North Carolina. Greene moved fast, always staying just ahead. The chase nearly broke both armies, but it pushed Cornwallis farther and farther from his supply lines. The clock was turning. The war was shifting again. Britain could not hold the South. The global war, the naval pressure, the rise of guerrilla resistance, the strategic brilliance of Greene, All of it pushed Cornwallis toward a fate he could not yet see. A quiet place in Virginia, a small tobacco port on a river. A name not yet etched into history. Yorktown. The trap was forming. The end was approaching. And the world was watching.